Hi boys and girls, welcome back to Delboy's Garage. Okay, now today I just want to do something a bit different. I'm going to swap a brake hose over. The reason it's my neighbour. The reason I want to just change this, I'm just going to swap out this braided hose. I don't like it, it's a crappy one. It's kind of an aftermarket one that's got this braided covering. And what this braided covering has cleverly done around here on the clutch cable side is it's rolled its way through the powder coat and eaten into that, so you know it ain't very clever. It's not properly protected. And when we put braided hoses on the wife's Sportster, I put proper Goodrich hoses, these super slim, really proper aftermarket hoses. But on the iron that I bought, it's got these hoses, and they're kind of they're no brandy, you know, sort of no brand limited. They're rusting at the top, they're rusting down at the bottom. Just on here they've got little bits of corrosion, and they're too long now. Really, they were kind of put on because my mate put taller bars on and I haven't, and now I've got all this extra hosage which is just not needed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that off and put this back on. Now you're probably already howling and thinking, what on earth are you playing at? This is the original hose. This is the hose from wife's Sportster, which we took off, and I kept it. This came off when the bike had done about 50 miles. It's brand new. And looking into this a little bit, you get a metal section in the centre which is real tidy around the headstock, and the rubber bits that are in it are armoured. It is not your conventional rubber hose. Now I put these plastic seal caps on the end when I took it off, so it's been completely sealed ever since it was taken off, and I checked it through and it's perfectly fine, and it's going to be absolutely okay. Let's face it, an 883 Sportster with a single disc, the brakes are just rubbish anyway. You have to use the back brake, you have to read the road and ride a bit slower. You know, by comparison to a Japanese bike, these brakes, they're just lame. They're never going to be any good, you know, like the old saying goes, you can't polish. So putting braided hoses on really does very, very little. A lot of people will say it gives them more feel at the lever. Personally, when they're this rubbishy hose, I don't think they do. And I'm going to put that back on. Now changing a brake hose means bleeding the brakes. And bleeding the brakes is something, if you've never done it, it's something that's just a little bit scary. But it really shouldn't be, because it's ever such an easy thing. Dealing with bleeding hydraulics, bleeding through, making them correct and nice and stiff, it's a very easy task. So today all I'm going to do is I'm going to change this hose. It's just 2 bolts, one each end, route it and then put the clips in place, and then I've just got to bleed the fluid. The first job is to just loosen this top, because we're going to bleed the fluid out before we start. If you go breaking open a hydraulic system while it's all still bled up, you're going to get fluid everywhere. Now, very important, these screws, like I said, very easy to mince out. So get yourself a decent quality screwdriver. Even if you can't afford a snap-on one, go on eBay, get a second-hand one. There's a reason for it. These heads, they're proper sharp, and get the right size. Test it in the hole, make sure it fits. If you put a big screwdriver in that's too big, or a little one that's too little for that crosshead, you just mince it out, because they can go real tight. And again, little tap, just gently get it seated in its little hole. If you're doing it with a solid screwdriver, just give it a tap on the top. And all you do then is just gently, that's it, and that one just gets the screwdriver right down into the slot. Do it again. And press down as you twist, and it comes out nicely. There it is. Take your cap off, and there you go. So pop that again in your clean place where you're not going to jog it or get any grit on it. Now, taking a look, we turn the bars so that that's uppermost. Taking a look in that fluid, take a look down in it, you can see the bottom. If you can't see the bottom, that fluid has got to be replaced. You'll get grit in there, and we're going to replace that fluid anyway. It has to be replaced at 2 years. That's in your service book. This book's 1 year old, so who cares, do it a year early. I'm going to replace all the fluid in this. Right, so we're going to bleed that through. You need a little 10mm spanner. Come on down here. You're going to turn the bars uppermost. Okay, coming down the side, come on in. You need a little something to put your jar on. You're going to reuse the fluid. As you pump the fluid through, if you've never done brake bleeding before, it's just a case of persistence, and it's a little bit of a knack. You need your clear plastic tube, clear because then you can see the air bubbles, which is what it's all about, and a clean jar, absolutely clean, because the fluid's going to go into the jar, and then once it's kind of half full, we're going to just put it back in the top and keep bleeding it through and cycling it through till it's through with no air in it. Okay, that's the sum total of the system. That's all that was in it. Drop the bottom of the hose off. It's quite .4 fluid, modern fluids, not corrosive to paint like it used to be. So it's quite safe, really, doesn't hurt you. So what I've done is, at the top, the old 12mm metric again, just loosen off this banjo bolt. There's a little aluminium crush washer either side, and they are fine to use again. There will be people who will swear you have to have new washers every time. After maybe 3 or 4 times, absolutely, but not on the first time. This will have been a new set when this cheap aftermarket hose was fitted anyway. So cloth in the way, obviously, to prevent any drips going on anything, although it's not as corrosive as it used to be. Why take a chance? So there we are. That's the old hose out of the way. Now we're just going to pop the new one in, or the new old one. So this has been sealed up, like I said, ever since it came off the other bike. Pull these caps off, checked inside, nice and clean in there. Screw it through, start bolting it on. Alright, just if you've never done this before, you have to go yourself for the first time. Banjo bolt, alley washer. You can use copper, both the same thing, just a soft crush washer. Through the banjo, washer on the other side, and pop it in. Just orientate it so it's in the right place. With a little bit of care, it should be fine. A lot of people also worry about doing these up and they wind them up real tight. I've had bikes where I've gone to deal with these and I found they're so tight they're almost welded in. It just isn't any need. You've got an alloy thread, which is a soft thread, and it seals in itself. You've got alloy washers to protect it, so you really don't need to lean on it. There is a torque setting, it's in the book. I haven't looked it up, but I've never bothered looking them up. I just do them to a nice kind of feel. There we are, there's the top one. I'm just going to nip it gently so it retains a little bit of free play until it's done at the bottom. And it's the same old procedure again. I'll show you. Just want an alloy washer already on the banjo bolt, pop it through the banjo. When it's in, poke a washer on the other side, so you've got one either side of the banjo, and then line that up with the caliper and screw it in. Bleeding brakes is something that people sometimes find, if you've never done it, people do pay the dealer for it because it is a bit of a scary job, but it really needn't be. Again, you don't have to lean on these, just hand tight there with the wrist. That's it, good enough. If that weeps, just nip it up a bit more. If it doesn't weep, it doesn't need any more. It's common sense, you don't have to worry too much. If you're really concerned, torque them up. But a friend of mine, Sally, she did some work with her bike, used a torque setting with a torque wrench and snapped a bolt off. For some reason the torque wrench setting was wrong or whatever. It isn't always right, and sometimes the torque feels too much. So just do them up by hand, give them a little nip. Now we've got to fill the whole system with fluid and get it bled through. Alright, first job is to get the fluid that was in the bike. This stuff's cool, I'm absolutely happy with that. It's not dirty, it's got no particles in it whatsoever, so I'm going to pop it back through. Because it's going to come out the bottom end, we're going to bleed this through. This is not the fluid that will stay in the bike at the end. So put the jar or the bucket, put the tube in. It's 3 or 4 pumps on the system. Just make sure that it's not popping out the top, because with the cap off it can just burp out the top. So just gently lever into the bar, 3 or 4, build up pressure, hold it in, undo, allow that to swell, and if you look now, if you watch down here, you see the air bubbles now popping out. I'll do it again, I'll show you. So up this top end off camera, if you come in close to this, up the top off camera, I've done about 5 pumps, hold it in, undo that, and look at that, air just bursts out. And for every bit of air that's bursting out, fluid is coming in. So we're just filling the system up now. And this is going to be about 10 minutes, 15 minutes of that, until it comes all the way through. Do you know what I mean? About halfway bled now. There's fluid through it, but it's got a little bit of air in, and this reservoir's now empty. So this is now time for the new fluid. Just topping it back up, because the old fluid that was already in there, I've pushed all that through out the other end. Back on. And now it's time to bleed some new fresh fluid through, and just keep flushing it through until all the air bubbles are gone. Okay, like so many brake bleeding situations, it just wasn't having it. There was air that wouldn't come up. These hoses are slightly larger bore, and sometimes you'll find that little tiny particles of air, they'll just keep bleeding up the side of the fluid. You pump in the fluid down to try and bleed it through, but the air just keeps coming up the side and you'll never get rid of it. So this is a little trick which I've always used, and a lot of people go on forums and stuff and say, how do I bleed my brakes? I can't get it to bleed up. This is a great trick, it works every time. Undo everything, take the caliper off the disc, take all the mounts off, and have just like this, have the whole brake hose just upwards. Remember, air travels upwards. Air travels upwards, so as we've got down here, this is still connected in every way. Just took all these P-clips off that hold it in place. The air is now naturally going to travel up of its own accord, and it will travel up to there, and you just have to give it 10 minutes, pump a few, and you just get huge squirts of air out, because the air's coming up, just using physics. Just use, like I've done there, a little bit of old number plate as a disc. This represents the disc. Obviously you've got to have something in there, otherwise when you're pumping it, your pads are going to come out. So although I need to replace these pads at some point, they're fine for the moment. But there's a trick, just use a bit of old number plate or a bit of old cardboard, something solid if you will. Just put that in there to stop them from pushing the pistons out. And then all you do is, literally it's a 2-person job, but you get somebody to pump the lever, and it naturally pumps the air up. Normally when you're bleeding brakes, you're trying to fight physics. You're trying to push the air downwards against where it wants to go. This is doing it the right way. So if you really do get a problem, get a bit of wire on top of your caliper and just hang it up. Grab that back. And just literally hang it up from a bit of wire from the ceiling or roof of your garage, and just leave it there overnight. And all the air will go up to the caliper in the morning. Squirt, squirt, job done. Absolutely solid system, guaranteed every single time. And that's how the dealers do it. So that's how I do it. If you get a problem and you can't bleed it up, try that. So we're just going to give this a couple more pumps through. I'm going to change one more container. This reservoir here is about half full, so I'm going to fill it up, pump one more of those through, check the level, put the lid on, and then rebuild everything. Alright, that's everything rebuilt. Put back together. If you look at the sight glass in the front, that's where you check that you've got brake fluid, but when it's halfway through the sight glass, which often it is, if you look inside, look how little fluid that is. It really isn't clever. It needs to be higher than that at the top of the glass. So I'm just going to top this up with fresh fluid. That is fresh fluid because we bled 2 reservoirs through the system. So on the front there, looking in the glass, coming up to the top of the glass. You probably can't see it, as I was just told, but I don't care, that's correct level. Okay, putting this back on. Bit of something incredibly clean. Just take all that grit that may have got on it, or dust. Don't need any contaminants in the system. Off the rubber gaiter. Pop that back on. Now the torque on, there is a torque setting for these screws. It's in Newton inches, I think. I've no idea what it is. It's just sort of fist tight. But again, you can feel for it. Practice in your workshop, practice working on your bike, and you'll feel threads, you'll feel when things feel right. Can't explain how, it just does, you just feel them. That one's in. That one's in, okay. Get the lid right, and again it's just get some pressure on that screw before you lean on it. These don't need to be tight, really don't need to be tight. For some reason, certainly in old jet bikes, in the old 80s jet bikes, they always minced out because people just wound them up. There's no need for it. There we are. They are just kind of just done up. Can't say it. They just feel that that's it. Once you have to start putting any pressure on them, just remember they're a tiny screw. Don't lean on them. That's it. Squish the bit out, get a cloth, clean it up, and that is job done. End X. That's it. Let's pop out those pads. And that's it. Now another little trick, just finally, I want to show you this. Loads of you probably know this, loads of you blokes already worked on your brakes. If your brakes are spongy and you either can't bleed them or you just don't feel confident, there's a little trick you can do, and you should always do this when you bleed your brakes. You do this anyway. When you've finished the job overnight, you've got your lever. When that lever's in, the valve is open. It's open for air, any latent air in the system that might be left, to come up and work its way into the reservoir. So just pull it in, and just with anything you like, I'm using a bit of the old sock that was on these Biltwell bars, just literally tie a knot or a bit of gaffer tape, whatever, and just bungee it in. Not hard, not super hard, you don't need to lean on it. Just get some pressure on it, like a braking pressure, and tie it in overnight. And that leaves the valve open. It increases the pressure. Increasing the pressure makes the bubbles smaller. So as the bubbles get smaller, due to increased pressure, they travel through the fluid easier. So increase the pressure, wind that on, lock it off, and those tiny bubbles will come up, and you'll find in the morning, take that off, give it a few pumps, and that's tough as old boots, and that's a bled brake. Okay, that's all it is. I hope you enjoyed that. If you're scared of breathing your own brakes, you can see it ain't hard. It really is a simple job. It's just a case of a little bit of perseverance and using your common sense. Okay, that's all it was. Thanks ever so much for watching Delboy's Garage. See you next time.